So, Paul Stekler, we sit here the day after Super Tuesday.
Or not so Super Tuesday.
Yes, a mediocre Tuesday, maybe. Tell me a little about how you read the results yesterday, what it tells us about the GOP primary in the South and where we're going.
Sure. I mean, one of the ironies of this thing, Jim, is that the modern Republican Party, conservative Republican Party, was built in the South, on the white South. And the white South is almost irrelevant in this primary contest right now, mostly because you have, former Governor Romney against now three, incredibly unserious candidates. I mean, the fact that Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and Ron Paul would ever be taken seriously as national candidates is a reflection of the fact of Romney's weakness as a candidate right now. He can't win anything in the real South. I mean, Florida's not really the real South, and in Virginia, Gingrich and Santorum forgot to register. So Ron Paul, who's like the most ridiculous in terms of any of these candidates on a national level, got 40% of the vote. So you've got, the Romney campaign, it's outspending everybody, 12, 20 to 1. In Ohio, Santorum barely had any TV ads, and came out with these wonderful comments about, dissing John F. Kennedy, and other things that are completely irrelevant to the campaign, and he still almost won. So you got this weird campaign where Romney's obviously going to win. He's going to steamroller in because he's organized, he's got delegates, he's got money. He'll be able to accrue more and more delegates, but at the same time, the longer the campaign goes, the turnout levels are lower than they were 4 years ago when Republicans weren't actually jumping up and down with the McCain candidacy. Complete contrast to the Democrats in 2008, where turnout was gigantic, and record levels during the entire campaign. Clinton and Obama were thought of very well by all the Democrats. Their favorable numbers remained high. Romney's numbers are going down, down, down. I think his favorable now is down 25%. So that the longer this goes on, the worse his candidacy looks. So the way I read this is that he dodged a bullet, in Ohio by winning by a few thousand votes, so that at least it seems more inevitable that he's going to win, because the sooner he can get rid of the Three Stoogers, essentially, and he can actually concentrate on sounding moderate, and even better yet, trying to figure out how to sound like an actual human being as opposed to a cardboard cutout, the better he's going to do against President Obama. I mean, President Obama's in much better shape, but we still have 8+% unemployment. We still have a very dicey situation out in terms of foreign policy and what's going on in the Middle East and Europe and Greece, et cetera. So it's not as actually the greatest environment for an incumbent president, but Romney has got to start concentrating on honing his own message, focusing on what he wants to do, and also becoming a better candidate. And he can, and in contrast to the conservative rivals that he's got, he's looked very bad. So Super Tuesday was pretty good for him. I guess it depends on what happens in Alabama and Mississippi and all these primaries to come. And I think he's going to lose most of the southern ones. I don't think he has the legs to be able to win any place which is mostly white, conservative, southern votes.
On one hand, that all seems like a done deal in terms
Sure.
of Romney's weakness in the South, and yet his all but inevitability is the candidate.
Of course. And he'll win those races in November, by default.
Right. And so in looking forward to November, there's a lot of speculation right now about whether the difficulty Romney has right now really does impact what happens in November or
Right.
not. What do you think of that?
I think there's a certain tipping point in terms of the way people read candidates. I mean, obviously most normal people, besides you and I, are not concentrating on the political campaign right now. They have other things to do. But that said, Romney he has a really bad problem of connecting with people. And I think it's also partially that he doesn't sound like he believes anything, whether he does or he doesn't. And his stances right now are diametrically opposed to what he was when he was governor of Massachusetts. And if I was a Democrat media consultant, I'd be licking my chops to be able to make those commercials with, old Romney versus new Romney. It's kind of like a version of the flip-flopping, windsurfing John Kerry ads in 2004. That said, anything can happen. A presidential election, as you know, is always a referendum on the incumbent president. And the incumbent president also always has difficulties, and the incumbent president is always going to want to make the election about his opponent. The more the election is about Romney, the better it is for Obama. It takes our mind off of the fact that we are a divided country, that half of us like Obama, half of us hate Obama, and it's not going to change a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of real independents out there. So whatever Romney can do to be able to stop this bad process of this primary, because it's not helping him, it's not making him look any better, and to be able to get on to the general election, it does better for him. But the longer this goes on, the longer you cement an image in the public's mind, the worse it is for him in November. And at least the numbers right now, if the election happened right now, Romney would be in a lot of trouble. The irony of this whole thing is this big deal about the Texas redistricting. has really helped Romney. Because if Texas had voted the way it should have, with Super Tuesday, Santorum would have killed Romney. And he would have beaten him, 2-1. And the headlines today would be a lot different because many more delegates would have been decided in Texas. So, Mitt Romney has the Voting Rights Act to be able to thank, ironically, for his campaign.
That may be a pretty significant irony by the time this is over.
Yeah.
Do you think that Romney's problems are serious enough at this point, going into, and again, we're reading tea leaves, but serious enough to actually depress Republican turnout in the fall?
Well, as you know, as a political scientist, enthusiasm is very, very important. Republican distaste for President Obama is very, very high. Okay, and I think the big question is, how is the enthusiasm or lack thereof for Mitt Romney going to affect turnout, in November? A lot of it has to do with the dynamics of an election. If it seems like President Obama is going to win, and this is, sort of the way things were going in 2008, that depresses, the opposition's turnout. How is the Mormon angle going to affect the turnout in southern states? Well, he's going to win, Romney's going to win those southern states anyway. So that depression, which I assume is going to be there to a certain extent among evangelicals, wouldn't impact the winning or losing of those states. This is all going to be fought out in the Midwest. It's going to be fought out in Ohio and Michigan, in Indiana, in Virginia,
Iowa.
And Iowa. And a lot of those states have very, very contentious Senate races, a fabulous race in Virginia between Allen and Kane. So the dynamics are really not set right now. But the more Obama can make this about Romney, the better it is for him. Because of the two of them, Obama is a much better campaigner. Now the kicker in this whole deal is that Mitt Romney is not bad in debates. He's much better in debates than he is in actually talking in speeches or one-on-one. So it's, for Democrats to lick their chops on this and think that they've got this guy beat, this is a long ways to go. So Romney has a ways to be able to repair stuff, but this primary process has not been good for his national candidacy.